What happened since our 3-2, our lovely 3-2? Vitner, is it the trade? Is it China? What happened?
Well, it's trade, and it's also the uncertainty that the tariff war, tariff battle, whatever you want to call it, has unleashed, and that a lot of folks are just holding back on making big investments. And so we've seen a lot of weakness in capital spending. The global economy is feeling a lot more than the U.S., mainly because in China we've seen that car sales have fallen for the last 12 months. And so all of the economies that export a lot of auto technology to China are feeling it. Japan and Germany probably feeling it the most.
What do you think?
So I agree with that. I think there's just a lot of noise in the data injected by the trade and the uncertainty. And I think the best thing to do is kind of average between Q1 and Q2. So if we're right and the numbers we're tracking high ones or somewhere around 2, you're going to get a first half that's around 2.5. That's broadly in line with what everybody was thinking. The economy's slowing from 3% towards something that looks like 2% in the second half of the year.
And Boeing's impact is minimal?
Minimal, but it does show up in some of these inventory numbers. And we talked to David Strauss, our U.S. aerospace analyst, and their view is that production's going to slow from about a little over 50 737s a month down to about 42, and it may stay that way through the end of 2020. It's shipments that are really going to come down. I think those virtually come down to zero through the end of the third quarter and don't recover.
Of just the 737s,
Of just the 737s.
So what happens if you had a real negative in April? What happens in May? Does it continue to be bad?
Yeah, well, at least from the 737 perspective, yes, because I don't think as your previous segment pointed out, the review isn't until August. So a clean bill of health and when shipments and deliveries can proceed again probably won't be.
Do either of you blame
Q4.
the Fed for that last rate hike? Everybody wants to blame China and trade. Do you blame the Fed?
I think if they had to do that over, they'd probably take it back.
How about you, Mark?
Well, I was critical of it the day they did it. I thought that it was the wrong thing to do at that time, and that they were really missing it, that the inflation numbers were already decelerating, and housing was just in free fall. And since they've pivoted and they've kind of backed off a little bit, we've seen that housing has stopped falling, but it hasn't started rising. And I think that we're probably going to have to see a rate cut before we get housing back in growth mode.
Millennials. Don't they understand to have an Airbnb, you need to own it? Someone needs to own it. I mean, it doesn't, at some point, it's just it's maddening.
The greatest generation.
Yeah, think about that.
I'm a huge millennial fan. They work hard.
You've got a couple, right?
They work hard.
Joking.
No, I'm not.
No, he's not.
I'm not. I think they got a bad rap.
Interesting.
I like the ones I know are hardworking and have a lot of adversity.
You have very few non-consensus calls. That's one. That's a good one.
I'm a big.
They going to cut, Michael?
No, I don't. I think on balance, I think they can stay on the sideline through the end of next year.
What's happening with sovereigns? All we talked, Mark, both of you, all you're talking about are domestic things. Why are sovereigns? Why are yields plummeting everywhere? Mark?
I think that the trade uncertainty hits overseas economies much more than it hits the U.S., and I think that's particularly true in Germany. Certainly, the elections over the weekend didn't help things in Europe. I mean, that clouds the picture even more. But I think that's the story there. It puts a real low ceiling as to how high our rates can go. And I really think that in the next few days, we're going to see some numbers that are really critical. The ISM number that comes out on Monday, if that falls below 50, historically the Fed has cut when we've had the ISM above 50. So, I mean, that expectations are for a small rise because we had seen some improvement in the comparable ISM numbers, although the market numbers that came out last week were just terrible.
I just want to echo what Mark said. All the factory inventory manufacturing data is going to be critical at this point because we need to know how the manufacturing sector is reacting to all the stuff that's out there. Again, it's a small part of the economy, but it's a big part of the variability in the economy. The service sector is kind of like, basically flatline up a little bit, down a little bit, but the manufacturing is where you get all the action.
And don't we know, though, it's negative in IP, it's negative year on year.
In intellectual property?
Yeah. No, manufacturing production within IP is negative year on year.
Why don't you think they're going to cut, Michael? We just heard someone say every time there's been an inverted yield curve, it ushers in a rate-cutting cycle.
I just think that we are less levered to global trade. So to the previous comment, the rest of the world is feeling it a little more than we are. I think there's more virtuous cycle to go, meaning I think we can get more employment, more consumption to get us through this. I do think risks certainly are tilted to cuts.
Joe, I think we also have to listen to the Fed guys to think whether or not, like we talked about in the last hour, they think it's different this time. They think that all the global QE and the low rate to start with
it's technology,
means
maybe.
that a yield curve inversion is not your father's yield curve inversion. It's a millennial yield curve.
Technology. What is after millennials? What are my kids? They're
Generation Z.
Is it Z? I got my money on Z.
What's going to be after Z, by the way?
No, but Z. I don't know, but I got my money on Z. They're capitalists. You know, I realize why you like millennials. AOC, socialism. They're right along your line of things,
They just
right?
haven't seasoned yet,
Huh?
Joe.
And you know what else?
They're going to come around.
You know what
like
else?
Everybody comes around.
I agree.
You know
Don't
what I'm
write 'em
sad about?
off.
That we say room 222 or we say Cotter and we know what we're talking about. That will never happen again. There's thousands of series on. There's no more The Munsters. There's no more Bewitched. There used to be 3. Remember? There were
And the world is a
networks.
worse or better place for that.
I don't know.
Game of Thrones, Billions. You can name a bunch of
golden
series.
Oh, did you hear that,
television.
Sorkin? Give her some money.
golden age
Did
of
you hear
television.
that? You picked Billions out of. With Game
Out
of
of
Thrones,
Billions, yes.
that was totally that was a Homer.
Give
comment.
credit where credit is
Bad,
due.
you could take The
Breaking-
Wire.
Right.
There's a lot.
Okay,
of
maybe.
great-
I don't
All
watch
kinds
Billions.
of television.
Okay, well,
I'd like to say that publicly.
When I went to school,
I don't need to watch a sexually deviant Paul Giamatti.
I walked to school, uphill. Okay, but.
Okay.